The lights dimmed, and for a fleeting second, the world seemed to hold its breath. Inside a quiet studio, Zhao Lusi sat in front of the camera, her reflection captured in a black screen that hadn't yet come to life. Behind her, Liu Wu stood still, the faint hum of the air conditioner filing the silence. Time, as if by choice, stopped moving. For 2 years, neither of them had spoken to the world. No interviews, no public appearances, no red carpets. Just silence, deliberate, heavy, and strangely peaceful. They had not vanished out of weakness, they had vanished out of necessity. When the noise of fame grows too loud, silence becomes a form of survival. For Zhao Lusi and Liu Wu, the pause wasn't an escape from their careers, it was a quiet rebellion against the chaos that fame had built around them. Years before, they were unstoppable. Every show they touched turned into a sensation. The chemistry they shared on screen made audiences whisper that perhaps there was something more. Something unspoken. But between the dazzling lights and the relentless flash of cameras, they were losing something vital, the simple act of breathing. Success had its price, and for them, it was the slow erosion of authenticity. It began subtly, sleepless nights, rehearsals that felt mechanical, smiles that came out of habit rather than joy. Zhao Lusi, always radiant under the spotlight, began to feel like her reflection was more alive than she was. Liu Wu, the golden boy of his generation, carried the weight of perfection like a shield, one that began to suffocate him. Their friendship, once effortless and free, became a silent negotiation between emotion and expectation. Every glance on set, every laugh between takes, was dissected by the public and rewritten by tabloids. So, little by little, they stopped speaking, not just to the world, but to each other. In those days, they learned how to cry on cue, but forgot how to cry for themselves. The world thought it was scandal. Fans speculated endlessly, had they fallen out? Were they hiding something? But the truth was quieter, far more human. They had simply grown tired of performing not only for cameras but for life itself. The entertainment world has a cruel rhythm, there's no pause button, no space to lose your way. And yet, Zhao Lusi and Liu Wu found a way to press stop. It happened one night after a long shoot. The set lights flickered. The crew had gone home, and only the two of them remained. They didn't talk. They didn't need to. There was something sacred in the exhaustion they shared, something that told them both that this couldn't go on forever. 2 weeks later, Zhao Lusi canceled her upcoming drama. Liu Wu withdrew from a high-profile project without explanation. The media went wild. Fans shouted betrayal, secret conflicts, hidden romance. But neither of them responded. Instead, they disappeared quietly, leaving behind only unanswered questions and a silence that would stretch across 2 long years. Those years weren't a void, they were a journey inward. Zhao Lusi traveled alone, capturing moments through her camera instead of scripts. She began to photograph things that didn't speak, abandoned theaters, broken mirrors, flowers dying in slow motion, which was a fragment of the voice she had lost. For the first time in years, she wasn't acting. She was observing. Meanwhile, Liu Wu found solace in movement. He hiked through remote mountains, waking at dawn to watch the fog rise. He journaled, filling pages with thoughts he never intended to share. Maybe peace, he wrote once, isn't the absence of noise, but the courage to live without it. Though they lived in separate worlds, their silence ran parallel. Friends whispered that they occasionally exchanged letters, short, simple, unmarked. One of them was rumored to contain only 6 words, "Don't forget why we started this." Time passed slowly, tenderly, as if the universe itself wanted to give them space to heal. In the absence of appearances, rumors took root like weeds. Some called it a professional break, others called it heartbreak. What few understood was that those 2 years were not a retreat, they were a recalibration. Both were learning what it meant to exist beyond performance. Not for applause, but for truth. Not for escape, but for understanding. When Zhao Lusi finally returned to set, something in her had changed. Her laughter was softer, but more real. The girl who once feared imperfection now found beauty in vulnerability. She no longer chased perfection, she embodied honesty. And Liu Wu, standing in front of the camera again, carried a different kind of presence. Gone was the untouchable idol. What remained was a man who had faced the weight of expectations and chosen to put them down. His voice, quieter now. More power than ever before. They met again, unexpectedly. During a charity event in Shanghai. The atmosphere was elegant, lights dimmed low. Charged with polite conversation. When their eyes met across the crowd. Something wordless passed between them, not the spark of lovers, but the deep, quiet recognition of two souls who had survived the same storm. They didn't rush toward each other. Didn't perform. They simply smiled, and that was enough. In that moment, the world around them blurred. The noise of cameras. The murmurs of the press. The hum of fame, all faded into the background. What remained was a silence filled with understanding. The kind of silence that isn't empty, but whole. They had found what they lost, not the thrill of fame. Not even each other. But the courage to be human again. The story of Zhao Lusi and Liao Wu isn't about scandal or heartbreak. It's about rhythm, how the universe sometimes slows you down so you can hear your own heartbeat again. It's about the sacred balance between ambition and affection. Between creation and connection. And perhaps most importantly, it's about the kind of love that doesn't demand to be declared, the kind that exists quietly, beneath the surface. Bring two people back to themselves. When the cameras rolled again months later, the light touched their faces differently. Softer. Warmer. Real. There was no grand announcement. No confession. Just two artists. Standing side by side. To begin again, not as the people the world expected them to be, but as who they truly were. Time never really stopped for Zhao Lusi and Liao Wu. It simply waited for them to remember that even in silence, their story was still being written. They decided to speak again. The sky was pale and overcast, the kind of sky that blurs the horizon and makes everything feel both near and far at once. Zhao Lusi arrived first. Stepping quietly into the studio where time had once stood still. The air smelled faintly of dust and memory. Table, two chairs. A single microphone, nothing grand, nothing staged. Just space, and truth. Liao Wu entered minutes later. No entourage. No script. A deep breath that trembled slightly as their eyes met again. Not across a crowded event, but across the real, vulnerable distance of 2 years. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Zhao Lusi smiled, that same soft, certain smile that had once disarmed entire audiences. I didn't know where to start, she said. Chuckled quietly. Then maybe we just start from the silence. And that's what they did. They began by talking about the 2 years everyone wanted to understand. But instead of defending, they described. Instead of explaining, they remembered. People thought we disappeared. Zhao said, her voice calm. Reflective. But sometimes, disappearing is the only way to hear yourself again. I wasn't running away from work. I was running towards something quieter, something honest. Leo nodded. I think we both needed to learn who we were without the applause. I used to think success meant being seen everywhere. Now I think it means being able to see yourself clearly. Even when no one else is watching. The interviewer didn't interrupt. They weren't performing, they were simply existing, side by side. Speaking words they once buried beneath scripts and schedules. It wasn't a confession. It was a resurrection. Conversation turned to their careers, how ambition, though beautiful, can sometimes demand a kind of devotion that leaves no space for love. Zhao Lusi looked down at her hands. I love acting, she said softly. But there was a time when I couldn't tell where my characters ended and where I began. I started performing emotions instead of feeling them. She paused, then glanced at Leo. And he noticed before I did. Leo smiled faintly. I saw the same thing happening to myself. We both started losing the ability to be real. The industry gives you everything, fame, recognition, but it can also take away your sense of peace. I guess our silence was a way of asking for it back. Who shared a look that was neither romantic nor rehearsed, just understanding. It was the kind of connection that only comes when two people have faced the same storm from opposite sides. Those 2 years apart, they had become different people. Zhao learned to listen to her emotions instead of performing them. She took workshops in small theaters. Surrounded not by cameras but by truth. There were days, she said, when I cried in the middle of a scene, not because it was scripted, but because it was the first time I allowed myself to be vulnerable again. Leo, on the other hand, spent time mentoring young actors. He said it helped him rediscover the purpose behind his craft. Watching them reminded me of why I started. The hunger. The innocence. I had forgotten that. Sometimes growth isn't about climbing higher, it's about remembering the ground you came from. Both spoke of learning to respect time, to see it not as an enemy but as an ally. I used to fear stillness, Zhao said. See it as part of the rhythm. You can't have music without pauses. Leo nodded thoughtfully. Can't love without silence. Their story wasn't about a romantic reunion, it was about reconciliation with themselves. They didn't claim to be together. They denied the bond that connected them. It was something quieter than love and deeper than friendship, a mutual recognition of two souls who understood the price of passion. When asked if they ever felt pressure to define their relationship, Zhao laughed softly. Everyone always wants a label. But the truth is, some connections don't need one. We've already said everything, just not with words. Leo added, we've learned that love doesn't always mean possession. Sometimes it means letting the other person grow. If it's not beside you, we still care. Fade just because cameras stop rolling. Honesty in their tone left the room still. Even the interviewer seemed unsure whether to continue, as if afraid to disturb something sacred. Later, they spoke about the price of authenticity in an industry built on illusion. Zhao said she no longer chases perfection, she chases truth. Before, I wanted people to like me. Now I want them to feel me. Leo agreed. We used to live for applause. But applause fades. The only sound that matters now is the one that comes from inside, the one that says, you did it honestly. They both smiled, and in that simple exchange, it became clear that their courage didn't lie in coming back, it lay in coming back differently. They were no longer trying to prove anything. They were living proofs of something larger, that silence can be fertile. That distance can heal. Two people can lose each other for a while without truly being lost. When the cameras stopped rolling, they rushed to leave. Zhao lingered by the window, tracing her finger across the condensation on the glass. Leo stood a few feet away, watching the city lights flicker outside. It feels strange, she said quietly, to talk about it all out loud. He smiled. Yes, but it also feels like breathing again. There was a pause, not awkward, just full. A silence that said everything words couldn't. Turned to him, her expression thoughtful. Do you think people will understand? Leo hesitated, then said. Maybe they don't need to. Maybe it's enough that we do. She nodded. Maybe that's all stories are, ways of remembering who we are. Weeks after the interview aired, the response was overwhelming, not for gossip, but for grace. Viewers wrote letters. Not about scandal, but about healing. They thanked Zhao and Leo for reminding them that taking a step back doesn't mean giving up, it means growing up. For the first time in years, headlines weren't about who they were rumored to love, but about how they had learned to live. Zhao began working on a new drama, a smaller project. Slower in pace, deeper in emotion. She said she didn't want to act for popularity anymore, she wanted to act for truth. Leo, meanwhile, produced a film that explored silence as a metaphor for identity, a quiet reflection of his own 2-year journey. They didn't promote each other's work publicly. They didn't need to. The quiet support between them remained constant. Unspoken but unmistakable, a shared heartbeat beneath separate rhythms. Months later, during the premiere of Leo's film, appeared unexpectedly. She slipped into the theater unnoticed. Her hair tied back, wearing no makeup. Just a soft gray coat. When the credits rolled, and his name filled the screen, he smiled, a smile of recognition, of quiet pride. Outside the theater, reporters asked if they were back together. Zhao didn't answer. She simply said, where we need to be. That's enough. Perhaps it was. Because some stories aren't meant to be tied with a perfect ending. They're meant to breathe, to unfold, to rest, to begin again in ways unseen. Lucy and Leo Wu's story wasn't about rekindling something lost. It was about honoring what had always been there, the courage to be true, both to their craft and to themselves. In the end, it wasn't the silence that defined them, but what they found within it. They discovered that balance isn't something you chase, it's something you create. Moment by moment, choice by choice. And to work, to dream and to rest, to give and to keep a little piece of yourself untouched, that is the delicate art of being alive. As the sun set on their final day of filming the interview, Leo bathed in golden light. Zhao looked at Leo and said softly, Do you ever think time really stopped? He smiled, eyes reflecting the fading glow. No, he said. Think it was waiting for us to catch up. Just like that, the story that began in silence ended not with applause, but with understanding. A story not of loss, but of return. Not of endings, but of balance. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't to run faster, it's to stop long enough to feel your heart beating again.